President Trump is really proposing across-the-board cuts in terms of the budget for most of the federal government. Big notable exception, the Department of Defense. We're drawing down troops, or looking to draw down troops in some key conflict zones right now. What do taxpayers need to know about this increase in the budget?
Well, this is a big day for the Army because we will be presenting to Congress a very bold budget that really reflects the shift for the Army into the national defense strategy that calls us to be prepared for high-intensity conflict against countries like Russia and China. And at the same time, it also underscores, as part and parcel of that, this renaissance that the Army is in with regard to how we man, organize, and train and equip the force. So it's a very, very big budget for us.
And in terms of that Army renaissance, what are the budget numbers? Can you share those with us?
Well, we'll have a top-line request of around $182 billion, and that will allow us to continue to grow the force. That will allow us to begin the shift of over $30 billion over 5 years to really modernize the force, to move away from the legacy of the last 3 or 4 decades into the future in terms of building semi-autonomous and autonomous vehicles, robotics, incorporating artificial intelligence, all those things we know that we need to fight and win on future battlefields.
I want to dig into all of that technology a bit more, but first, some of the experts that I've spoken to have said that as we do draw down troops in places like Afghanistan and Syria, that it could become more challenging for the Army to request more funding. What would you say to them?
Well, it allows us actually to prepare, to be more ready, because we can spend more time at home station training our forces to be prepared to fight the big fights, whether it's Russia, China, or someone else. So that's been our focus, is how do we prepare the forces? How do we retrain? How do we equip them? How do we reorganize our formations? I mean, one of the things we're doing right now is rewriting our doctrine for future warfare. And all that's going to play out over the next 10 years as we implement the Army vision that the Chief of Staff of the Army and I wrote last summer.
What do you see as the biggest threat facing the U.S. right now?
I think the biggest immediate challenge, obviously, is North Korea. And then as we look in the out years, between 2025 and 2035, Russia. But the biggest challenge is clearly China in the years 2035 and beyond. I mean, the size of the country, its economy and everything is there. It's a very big strategic competitor for the entire Department of Defense and for the country.
It's interesting to hear you talk about China. Obviously, these trade talks between the U.S. and China continue. If the administration actually does strike a trade deal, how would that impact the strategy that is being put in place by you in terms of the Army and the Defense Department more broadly?
Well, I'm not sure it impacts the strategy at all, really. Clearly, we need a strong economy in order to build a strong military. That comes first and foremost. But we will remain focused on making sure we prepare our forces to fight that high-intensity conflict wherever it may be. I
want to shift gears for a moment because, unfortunately, the news of the day is focused on that deadly crash of a Boeing aircraft. And it seems by the moment right now we have more countries looking to ground some of those flights, and the world's really focused on that right now. Now, I realize it's a commercial aircraft.
Right.
I realize there are more details yet to come. Boeing is a big contractor for the U.S. Army. How closely are you tracking this? And depending on how all of this plays out, is it the type of thing that could cause you to reevaluate your relationship?
We closely track the systems that Boeing builds for us, and there's some very capable systems. So that's been my focus. It's something that I look at every month. I look at the metrics for all of our major combat systems and our platforms, which Boeing builds many, and they're very successful platforms. We have challenges here and there, of course, but I focus on the programs that the Army is running.
And now, in terms of some of the reforms that you're putting in place, this bigger strategy, this pivot, really, for the U.S. Army, this renaissance you're talking about, more technology, I would imagine more outreach and more work with Silicon Valley and technology companies. How is that going? It's
going well. I try and get out and meet with CEOs every week if I can to talk about where the Army is going, to assure them with regard to what our 6 modernization priorities are and the fact they won't change, because business needs that predictability so that they can invest and they can help us move into the future. And so every time I talk to a CEO, we also get some good feedback on what we can do differently and better. Clearly, acquisition reform is very important. So we're doing everything we can to get rid of unnecessary processes, to get rid of regulation, and really partner with industry to help us achieve those technological advances that we need to retain overmatch in the future.
Have you met any resistance in terms of the technology community? Because certainly we've been hearing about more, I guess, employee pushback, whether it's at Microsoft or Google, in terms of partnering with the military.
Yeah, no, I haven't, actually. In fact, what the Army did last summer is we stood up Army Futures Command. It's the biggest organizational change in the Army in 45 years. And we set this Futures Command up in Austin, Texas, a technological hub that's growing. It's very vibrant. And what we've done is opened up our doors and said to the young entrepreneurs and innovators of any size and scale, come on in. The Army's open for business. We want to partner with you. And frankly, we've heard nothing but a lot of excitement and optimism and energy with regard to the Army's outreach.
How do you ensure that these new technologies, like AI, for example, are used responsibly?
Well, we have to think about that, particularly with AI, in terms of how we would employ it. I mean, my vision is, as we've talked to folks, is there will always be the so-called soldier in the loop with these systems. But clearly, AI will enable the soldier to act and think much more quickly. And if you can do that on the battlefield, because whoever gets to AI first, I believe will have dominance for many years afterwards. So we have to get there first, but we also have to be conscious of the ethics of warfare, too, so we maintain that person in the loop.
So in light of that, in light of this budget and the details around this request that are being unveiled today, what does the Army of the future look like, and how will those future battles be fought? I
think the Army looks much more robotic. It has much more semi-autonomy and full autonomy built into the system right now. I mean, we're experimenting now with semi-autonomous vehicles, leader-follower transport systems. So you'll see a lot of that. And I think you'll see technologies that will guarantee soldiers much greater survivability and lethality on the battlefield.